Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for being here. Over the years, the Tata Literature Live Awards have honored outstanding contribution in the field of writing. They have been for people who have had several years as writers, from the Lifetime Achievement Award, the Poet Laureate Award. We've also honored young writers through our Literary Award in fiction and non-fiction. The Rotary Writing for Peace combines both of these. We are honoring someone who is a veteran in the industry, who's been here, who has worked for human rights, for peace, for decades. But the award itself is something new, and we are very pleased that we can be the platform for Rotary to share this award. As many of you know and who have attended our sessions, peace may not directly be something that is part of the discussions, but it is a fundamental part of what we try to talk about. We try to bring out humanism and humanitarianism through our sessions, through our discussions. And in the same way that we have curated all our awards with a great deal of rigor from the juries, it has been our pleasure to work in the same way for the Rotary Writing for Peace Award. So as part of the committee, as part of the Tata Lit Life Committee, we are very, very pleased to be the platform to honor Ms Nandita Haskar as the first and the inaugural recipient for the Rotary Writing for Peace. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I have the privilege of introducing today's recipient of the first Rotary Writing for Peace Award. Nandita Haskar is a campaigner, teacher, and a writer. She has set many precedents in human rights and refugees law. She has taken up cases in the courts in India, as well as appearing before international courts and committees. She has evolved and taught courses on human rights in various universities. She filed the first case in the Supreme Court challenging the constitutional validity of the Armed Forces Special Powers Act, and was the first lawyer to take the issue to the United Nations in 1991. Nandita ji is the author of over 15 books to promote peace and harmony. She was awarded a degree of LLD honoris causa from the National Law University, Hyderabad in 2015 in recognition of her work in the field of human rights. In her 3 decades as a feminist, Nandita ji, born in 1955, has contributed immensely to the development of a rights-based perspective on complex political issues. Nandita ji is married to Mr. Sebastian Hongre, her opposing counsel in the first case, where she won. Thank you.
Good afternoon. It's lovely to see a lot of Rotarians over here. Thank you for attending this session. So a lot has already been said about Nandita Haskar. I'm just going to add a bit to it. She's just not a human rights lawyer, peace activist, and feminist, but she's an intrepid traveler and a great connoisseur of food. An empathic and very, very empathetic human being and bridge builder, she has written very perceptively about the struggles of people in conflict areas like Nagaland and Kashmir, and the need to look at conflicts from a humane political approach. Not simply as a law and order issue, her fight for justice for those accused of terrorism with limited evidence has been remarkable and courageous. Her book, Flavors of Nationalism, Recipes of Love, Hate and Friendship, is an exceptional example of building bridges through food, celebrating differences, and the appreciation of nuances. It also exposes the gendered bias of the supposedly progressive movements and organizations in India. Ms. Haskar's range of writing can be evidenced in her book, Across the Chicken Neck, an engrossing travelogue that throws up fascinating insights into the wealth of stories contained in the Northeast. She has consistently taken a humanitarian position on the rights of refugees and the need for refugee protection law in India and overseas. In Forgotten Refugees, which is a book about 2 Iraqi brothers in India, She creates a space for 2 Iraqi refugees to tell their stories in their own personal voices. Ms. Haksar needs to be celebrated as a lady of peace in a world which is increasingly becoming very, very polarized. It is only fitting that she is the recipient of the Rotary Writing for Peace Award. Please give a rousing welcome to Ms. Nandita Haskar. Thank you.
Thanks. Good morning, everybody, and congratulations on your latest award, Nandita. Welcome to Bombay. Like all people in the news business, I check my phone obsessively for updates. After all, you never know if your currency is going to be demonetized at 4 hours' notice, or you will be called to your window to bang a thali to drive away viruses. When my phone is locked, I can see only 2 lines of a message. And the name of the sender. And every time I get email from you, it sends me into a sort of flurry of delighted anticipation. My dear Naresh, the screen will read, "May I write about?" And then I excitedly have to open my email, unlock my phone, and read the rest of the message because I'm never certain, I can never guess what you are going to be suggesting. Sometimes it could be a story about refugees or the Armed Forces Special Powers Act, or why it's important to defend the autonomy of your alma mater, JNU. But it could just be a subject that is complete, that sort of the readers of your books would not associate with you. And so it has come to pass that you've written in Scroll about Christmas songs, the Tanzanian Instagram star Kili Paul, and UFOs. Many of your pieces leave me startled at the enormous levels of energy you put into them and your commitment to ensuring that the right thing is done. In May 2021, you wrote about how you'd made a bumpy, uncertain ride to Manipur in the middle of the pandemic to fight a court case to ensure that journalists from Myanmar and their families could enter India and seek protection from the UN High Commissioner of Refugees and in Delhi. In May 2020, a few weeks after lockdown, you wrote an alarming account from Goa about how you'd help find shelter for migrants from northeastern states. And then when they finally managed to get a special train headed home, it turned out to be a journey from hell. A trip that should have taken 61 hours took 119 hours. And you had to call in favors of friends of friends of friends across the country to get them food and water as the train meandered through Madhya Pradesh and Uttar Pradesh. As I've revisited several of your books over the past fortnight to prepare for this conversation, I've been bowled over by this breathtaking sweep of your interests and concerns, the incredible depth of your empathy for people in crisis, and the profundity of your concern for India and our democracy. A great many of your 19 books, with the 20th forthcoming, have violence written into their very titles. Delhi riots, 3 days in the life of a nation. Many faces of Kashmiri nationalism from the Cold War to present times. Kuknalim Naga armed struggle among them. Given that you've written so much about conflict, what do you make about getting a Peace Award?
Well, actually, I'm not sure. I was actually shocked when I heard the news that when I was asked or told about this Peace Award. And I'm still under shock. But when looking deeper into it, I don't think I was writing in terms of violence and peace. I was writing in terms of the trouble spots in India, how we could listen to their stories and understand what their grievances were. So this is because we don't seem to listen to voices which we don't agree with. We dismiss them as controversial instead of complex. So for me, it really it is an honor to receive an award at this juncture in our history, when all conversations, even comedians are being put in jail. So to be recognized for books which are obviously political, are concerned with the issue of conflict and grievances of people. Kuknalim, which you mentioned, carries interviews with Mr. Muiva Ezeksu, leaders of Naga insurgents who have been waging war. But the issue is that why did they give me an interview? It is because even they know that at the end of a long conflict, it is through political negotiation that we can achieve a resolution. And they want their voices heard. They want their grievances heard. And as a writer, I think that is what I want. I want to be able to document their voices so there is a national conversation. There's an engagement with all of us. It's not only between the government and the NSCN, government and the Kashmiri militants. It should be a conversation and political engagement with all of us as citizens of India. And if that conversation and that writing leads to peace, then maybe this is why this anonymous jurors had thought of it. And I'm really grateful that they should recognize this, because this goes well beyond honoring an author. I think it is an indication of the need for such conversations.
You trained as a journalist, doing a stint with the Times educational supplement in London, and then you worked with the Indian Express for some time. How did your time as a journalist help you write these books?
Well, my publisher, who's not here, may not agree, because there's a lot of editing behind my books. But I think it helps. One is the editing. It makes you tighter. I was sub-editor, I was not a reporter, so my training was editing. It also sees, I don't like always seeing two sides to things. I like seeing my side, the right side. That's why I like being a lawyer. But journalist training does, help you see or at least understand two sides. So a professional journalist training certainly helps in this kind of writing.
Mm. Yeah, and then, as I was going to ask you, you gave up journalism and took up the law. Why did you think the law was a more effective way of bringing about social change?
Well, number one, at that time, journalism was really much less. Today, it was very limited scope. And also, as I said, I like taking sides. I don't like being objective, except insofar as being honest. Honest and objective are two very different things. And I like taking up, I liked it. My 30 years of practice meant I could take sides and fight for the people I think are right. Why should I see the other side? If I take up migrant workers, I don't need to see the other side. But then in writing, of course, one has to see many sides. So I've, I think, grown up a little bit.
Mm. Ipso facto, the vocabulary of the law is always taking suo moto cognizance of matters and looking at them ab initio or whatever. It's a very different language from the world of nonfiction. How do you manage to switch seamlessly between the language of the law and the language of these wonderful books?
I don't use legal language in my petitions. So they say I'm not very professional when I'm writing in law petitions. And I don't understand it most of the time. In law practice also, I try to use the skills of a journalist or writer to be able to convey the reality to the court. The judges don't see it. So I would write long descriptions of Adivasi or bonded labor so that in Supreme Court or wherever High Court, they could see it. So my petitions do not read very professionally according to lawyers. There's a lot of storytelling even in the petition. And I think that was one way of conveying the reality to the judges.
You know, I've been very envious of your skills as an interviewer. In your books, you get other people to tell you about their darkest moments, their fears, their childhood memories, their dreams. You have Iraqi refugees in Delhi telling you about, you know, the books they read as children, Thankul Naga women trying to fashion new lives in Delhi, Kashmiri Pandit communists. What's your secret to getting them to open up?
I think it's because I went to them as a lawyer. So I have got their trust. So as a lawyer, when I do the cases, then I'm fighting their cases. I'm representing them. So I think I win their trust that way. As a journalist, maybe you see them first time and second time you're interviewing them. So it's much more difficult for a journalist to win the trust and start talking. And then I have a long association because normally most of, like Sampat Prakash, the Communist Trade Union Kashmir, it was 4 or 5 years the case went on. And after that I, wrote the book. So I think it was the law which helped me and gave me a glimpse, front side view of what was happening. And that's how I managed to
Who were the most difficult subjects you've had to deal with?
Actually, strangely speaking, the Nagas, Naga migrants. Because the Naga migrants, in Naga culture, as maybe some other Southeast Asian cultures, it's not done to speak of your own problems. So if you ask anyone, even if they're very ill, and how are you, the polite thing is to say very well, thank you. You don't say, some other cultures, I'm sorry, but like Bengali, you would say, no, my sir is paining, my heart is paining, my head is paining, but you just don't do it. So for them to come out and actually speak, so that book took the longest, it may be the smallest book, but 2009 to 16, to get them to speak. But once they spoke, they did want to tell their stories. And so this, in Exodus, Atim, who's actually my husband's cousin, when her sister was murdered, she wanted to, she was angry. But then the other problem is they didn't have words because the experiences that they're going through, they don't have words. They don't have an experience of working in a shopping mall or an experience of your sister getting murdered in a town and being misunderstood because she smiled at the person. So it's very, very difficult for them to find the words. So one of the characters in that book is, he's real, Livingstone, who was a waiter. And now he owns a restaurant. So just before coming here, I asked him, I said, Livingstone, when you went home and you told those people who thought, you were useless and they didn't give you money and now you own a restaurant in Goa, what happens? So he says, there's no different word for a restaurant, fine dining restaurant, there's no word in Thankul Naga. So all I can say is that I have a chai ki dukan and they think I have a chai ki dukan, not a fine dining. So these are very complex. As a writer, it's a complex problem of representing people, non-verbal cultures, and to being true to their culture and not putting in your feelings. So that was probably the most difficult.
Mm. Yeah, you've spoken of, you just told us about how you try to engage with people who have deep-seated grievances with the Indian state. Could you elaborate on why it's important to tell stories and the price you've paid for telling those stories?
Well, the price is being paid much more by many friends who are in jail even today, right here. But, again, the issue is I'm a Kashmiri Pandit background. My father's known as a bureaucrat. He's known to have been one of the people who started RAW. But I didn't hide all this. It isn't hidden. It's a fact. And yet I got Afzal Guru, who was accused in attacking Parliament. He was involved in the attack of Parliament. He wasn't involved in killing anyone, but he was, and he said he was. But he also, when he sees that you're honest, he wants to tell his story. So in the book, if you read it, there are 10, 12 pages of his writings, a letter to me. So all these people want to speak, they want to be recognized as fellow human beings. They don't want to be outcast. Nobody's there to listen to them, and if people listen to them in their stories and represent them, I think that is the first step. It's listening to them. So I think that is, I think that he was telling the truth, and we saw that he told the truth. After he was hanged, we got Pulwana, and the guy who had tortured him, I don't know there's time to tell the whole long story, but the policeman who had tortured Afzal Guru and who had made him party to this conspiracy to attack Parliament was himself, the policeman is in jail today because he was part of the terrorist network. So he was telling the truth. And now the Afzal Guru has been hanged. So I think it's very important. And he was not anti-India, he was just pro his own people. So I think that if we listen to their voices and we try and understand, we don't seem to want to understand. We want to impose our own views on others. And it's very enriching to be able to understand some other people's viewpoint. We don't have to agree with them. And he didn't agree. If you read that letter, he doesn't agree with me. And he says, your interpretation of Islam is wrong. We are discussing even Islam, our interpretation. Nothing was off, we could discuss it in the jail also. So all I think, my writing, I don't think I'm a great writer. I mean, today we're seeing real creative writers. But people's voices, they want to be heard. And we always said in Indian folk wisdom that Sunwai, the king always had a bell so that he could hear any grievance. That space is what I hope my book, and more than my book, is my writing is the publishers. If my publishers didn't publish it, I wouldn't get that space. So it is, unfortunately, Ravi Singh is not here, but Ravi or Naresh or NewsClick or all these publishers, they're the quiet heroes. The writers have their little moment of glory with publishing. In fact, there should be an award for publishers who take enormous risks, and they are under attack. So at this juncture, this kind of space that has been given, I really do want to focus on all the people who go behind this writing. And there are lots. It is me writing, but it's writing Sampath Prakash, who's been fighting for 30, 40 years. It's the Kashmir movement. It's the publisher. It is the editor. It is the stress of that publishing in this time, the money not coming in. And now, the paper not coming because of the Ukraine war. So, I do want to remember them on this occasion.
But you have paid a price for it. You describe how you've been burnt in effigy. And a little child said, why are they burning Auntie Nandita? You have had legal challenges to what you do. Tell us about that.
Well, I mean, considering really honestly what our friends are going through and who are in jail, it's very minor. But you're all the time, the last case that has happened right now is that we got 7 people, journalists and their families, 3 children rescued in Manipur, and we brought them to Delhi, UNHCR. Now they are recognized UNHCR refugees. Petition was over. 1 year after that, I read in the newspapers that Nandita Haskar brought 7 Rohingyas and they have disappeared. They're untraceable. All lies. I didn't bring 7 Rohingyas. I mean, in this case, there were 7. They were Buddhists and Christian, Chins, and they were Mizima. So suddenly, totally wrong report. And this was said at the bar. This was not said in an affidavit. And it went on, and then the police is coming and saying, you have to produce them. And the court is saying you have to produce these people who are not missing. So there is this level of harassment that any of us who will write or do anything will face. And this is not now, it has been even before. The phones are tapped and surveillance is done. It is a surveillance state. So I don't think I have paid anything more than others who are working in this, who have been working or writing or, doing anything.
For fans of your work, for people who've been following you for a bit, it's a great joy to read Flavors of Nationalism, because it's various characters and conundrums you've described in your other books sort of suddenly converge around your dining table or around a dining table and around the kitchen. The book was published in 2018, but you say you've been thinking about it since the early 1980s when you attended a human rights conference in Amritsar. Tell us a little about how the book came about and how many other human rights lawyers have found themselves at the Gourmand World Awards?
Well, actually, this book began because my first human rights conference was in Amritsar. And I had gone there. I was, very young. I had no idea what human rights or conference or anything. But it was in Amritsar. I enjoyed the food there, the makhani dal and all that. And one of our comrades from Andhra, now maybe Telangana, he loudly said, isn't there any rasam? And I turned around and I had been given this Nehruvian, unity and diversity, and when you go to Amritsar, you should appreciate their food. And here is this man in human rights, communist, demanding rasam in Amritsar. So it was from there I had thought of the name of, rasam in Amritsar to make fun. But this idea stayed with me that why we have such, forget all these very complex political problems. I think we are the only country in the world where our freedom fighters could not sit together and eat. And Perrier actually left. One of the grievances he had is that we don't sit together and eat. The upper caste freedom fighters don't eat with the lower caste freedom fighters. And Gandhiji at one time in 1920s said, well, this is part of the culture. Then he changed his mind in 1930s. So there's a debate between our freedom fighters on an issue whether we should eat together or not. I don't think any other country has such a debate. So then this book became, from being a slightly more frivolous and fun, became quite serious with the current debates. So that's how the book got written. And I think people identify because these were real everyday stories just put together into this Flavors of Nationalism.
And what were the World Gourmand Awards like?
I don't know, because I read it in the papers.
Okay.
And I asked the publisher that, do you know? He said, no, I read in the papers. So they only tell you in the papers.
In the introduction to the expanded version of Flavors of Nationalism, you say you're going to expand it into a quartet of books, which will include The Colors of Nationalism and The Deceptions of Nationalism. And then there's one more that
Riddles
you haven't.
of Nationalism.
Okay, you've now got a title for it. Tell us about the central arguments of these books, how you see this proceeding.
Well, Flavors was just on food, because whenever I sat down to write my so-called memoirs, it's not my memoirs, it's memoirs of all the things which we all did in the 70s, food kept coming. Whatever I did, food kept coming, so I got that out of the way in Flavors of Nationalism. And then Colors was a kind of looking in, because I was brought up, like I was 3 or 4-year-old when my mother took us for a picnic to Bhakra Nangal, to see the temples of modern India. But by the time I became a lawyer, the first cases I was doing was of people who were displaced by these temples of modern India. So I then had to do cases and to re-examine those issues. I not necessarily reject the Nehruvian ideas, but to modify those ideas. And so the Colors of Nationalism is really looking at those ideas with which I was brought up with, sort of an idealistic India where there was no conflict, to the India that I was seeing as a lawyer. And then there was an overemphasis on similarities. There was no discussion on differences. We were not told that we were Hindu. My sister, who was 8, came running to my mother and said, "Ki hum Hindu hain ki Muslim hain?" And my mother says, "Ye vahiyat sawal kyun pooch rahi ho? Why are you asking such vulgar questions?" So we didn't know we were Hindu or we were Muslim or we were Christian. We celebrated all. And I think that maybe that was wrong, because you can't just wish them away. And so when I did cases on Nagas, on Jharkhand, on Chhattisgarh, being in Delhi in Supreme Court, I got a look at all these. I realized that we do have to study what does unity and diversity mean. We have to go much more in depth. So the colors of nationalism really examines that. And then the deceptions of nationalism is that all this is very well, while we are talking about rule of law and we are talking about the Constitution and swearing by the Constitution and these wide principles, on the other hand, we have all this more and more surveillance. We have intelligence agencies, we have espionage, and espionage as nationalism. And to me, it was bizarre that, that England, when they have Olympics, they have the Queen and James Bond coming in, helicopter. It's funny. But their national hero is James Bond, a man who, is misogynist. He's violent, he breaks all rule of law. And he's a national hero. And then we call all our agents, poor, Mr. Ajit Doval or Ramji Bhai Kao, as James Bond. So what is, I saw these deception, these are deceptions of nationalism. So that book examines those things which are beyond the rule of law. And the riddles of nationalism, of course, was during the, the idea of citizenship. Because sitting in Goa, when the migrant crisis, now a lot of people in Goa are dual citizen, Portuguese and... So my first reaction was, as an Indian, I still have that India from New Delhi, was why should you have double citizenship? But this dual citizenship, there are MPs and rich people, but there are also fishermen who are OCI. So they're ordinary people who don't get jobs and they get an opportunity to go to Portugal and then they can't come back because they don't have citizenship. Then there is the diaspora, which then has many, many problems. So we went, my husband and I, just before, we went to East Africa, we went to Ethiopia. So there I found just one story, which is what Riddles is about, Malik Ambar. Now Malik Ambar was a slave who came from Ethiopia and became a king in Aurangabad, which they have just renamed something else. But Malik Ambar writes in his, not memoirs, the speech, some quotes of his, is that he's Indian. He was a black Muslim slave and he felt Indian. And India felt Malik Ambar was his. And now we are denying that. So these are riddles of what is citizenship. Today people are being denied citizenship. People on basis of religion. But Malik Ambar feels, so this last Riddles of Nationalism is like my conversations with Malik Ambar on riddles of citizenship.
Refugees have been among your abiding concerns. What has changed from the India of 1959 when the Dalai Lama found refuge here and the India of 2022 where we want to send Rohingyas right back and other people right back into the arms of the danger they have attempted to flee?
So my engagement with refugees started when I was doing a case in Manipur and the Burmese refugees were coming. I had no idea what refugee law was, and apparently I set precedent in refugee law mainly because I didn't know what I was doing. But so at that point, UNHCR would give them refugee status, would give them a stipend of 1,000 something, give them education, English language, all this. So this was what I knew. But this time in 2020, when I was trying to get the Burmese refugees, and these refugees are from Mizima. Mizima has a contract, signed a contract with Prasar Bharati in 2018, and they were given gratis visas. Now India is saying, and that is a petition filed against after 1 year against my petition, it's an SLP lying there, saying that we do not have any refugees in India, they are all illegal migrants and they are subject to being deported. So to the extent that there are 50 Chin women who have got resettlement in Australia, everything, Australia has accepted them, but government of India is not giving them exit visa. So this is, this is bizarre. And Rohingyas, who the government says is a threat to India, if they get Canadian, there are 5 of them in jail in Imphal. If they get resettlement in Canada, the court is not allowing them to come from Manipur to Delhi to take a flight to Canada. When Canada is accepting, we're not giving exit visa. So today, both migrant, illegal migrant, refugees, all these people are stateless. And they live in very precarious conditions, and if we see India through their eyes, it's not a very happy place.
At the heart of your books is a vision of a just, plural, democratic India. You describe yourself as a patriot, as an Indian nationalist. Where do we stand in our realization of this vision today?
We don't stand, but I don't know, maybe many of you also have thought it, but a lot of young people have given up this idea and they said, this is old-fashioned idea and we give it up. Maybe it is, but I don't see any other. So it's like you say, well, I don't want this, but it is yours. This is how I am defined. Where will I go? I go as a refugee, I would be treated the same way. England is putting their refugees in aeroplanes and sending them to Rwanda. So Denmark is doing it to Uganda. So there is a crisis of the concept of state and citizenship and sovereignty. And these are the problems which I think we have to engage with. And these are the things which we cannot run away. Some of us may be able to run away, but not all of us. So if we identify ourselves, and I feel this link with every fellow citizen, that it's our common problem. And that's why the necessary engagement, that what kind of country do we want to live in? And it's a very cliched metaphor, I know, but when your house is falling down, you don't leave it, you rebuild it. If it's on fire and if you don't have insurance, you still rebuild it. If it's in a floods, you still come back to the same land and rebuild it. So we are facing these problems, and I feel that we must engage with them. And we must be able to, I don't know the solution, I don't know with climate change, which is very real, what will happen. But if we want to rebuild it, and we rebuild it with hatred, because this hatred for outsiders, and I feel it. I feel that everywhere you go, you feel this, migrant is a problem, the refugee is a problem, because we are losing our sense of vision, we are losing our sense of ourselves, we are terrified, and we are frightened. It is frightening times. But in these frightening times, if we have that vision of India, and we fight for that vision of India, I think that is, gives a sense of meaning and purpose to life, because we can't escape it.
When we were preparing for this conversation, I called you and you were at the end of a long day packing up your life in Goa, where you've lived for many years, because you said you wanted to go home to Delhi. And I told you I was a little startled because I had always seen Goa as some sort of welcoming, inclusive place. What is your idea of home?
Well, I didn't go to Goa to escape home. I went to Goa because I was ill. And I found, I'd been in Manipur where I was outsider. Outsider word is Mayang. And even today, I have friends and I'm married to Naga, but I am a Mayang and outsider, but I don't feel personally attacked. They don't like Mayangs, and maybe I don't like things about Nagas, but we can eat together and have fun together, make fun of each other. So that's a very different kind of situation. But in Goa, it's very ugly. Even among activists, I found, I was told that, you remember that you are not a Goan. And, they're not I know that they were under Portuguese and we were under British, but I'm not going to argue which kind of colonialism is worse or better. Both are bad. So there is a kind of not all Goan, the poor people are lovely, they're very, very, very helpful and very warm, and There's something very charming about their shyness with which they help people. But there is this activists who are very Goan chauvinist, and it was getting ugly. And I didn't want to die in a place where I feel as an outsider. And it's not nice. And I then started saying this to my friends because I thought, look, this is, I'm not going to take it. I must say, to their own credit, last day, one of them said, you're not going to miss. And I was really upset. I said, no, I'm not going to miss. So this friend said, okay, didn't you write something on outside? I said, yes. He said, can I read it? So now that I'm leaving, they are reading. And yes, I hope one day I can go back and we can have. But the conversations, they have reacted. And, but because they are swamped by these tourists, I understand their reaction because the same in Northeast. But here, you can't walk in the streets because of the casinos in Panjim, so they are feeling swamped, I understand. But again, can they save Goa by themselves? No, they have to have alliances. And that part they have to learn. So maybe they will remember and maybe we will go back. But now I want to go to Delhi.
The clean, fresh air of
Yes.
Delhi in the winter.
I told you, it's home.
We've got about 5 or 6 minutes for questions, so let's open it up. There's one here. Somebody will bring a mic to you. Up front.
Mrs. Haksar, one of the things I have seen is discrimination everywhere. Even in the same country, the US soldiers did not eat together. They fought the same wars. You see Jackie Robinson eating out in the car, his white football players or whatever game he played, eating inside. And maybe the answer is for us to go and eat with those who are outside, to be there and say, yes, I'll do it. The other thing is it's very, very hard to get correct, true news. We've all read the Littlewood report about the Leicester violence. It's totally, totally different from what the British papers are writing. And then Kathy Kekeely wrote a paragraph in the Washington Post, which was immediately deleted, which said, Pakistan spends 20 million on a Smear India campaign. So even the Washington Post, with all its money, its backing, deleted that. What do lesser reporters and newspapers do? How do we get news? These are the two things.
Yeah, so you should ask this to Naresh because this is the challenge. And now the challenge is even greater. So to get the news and for anyone who wants to fight for the truth, that's why I mean, it's a very big challenge. I think there was a debate the other day here on social media. So this is the challenge of technology today. So I don't have the answer. I barely know how to do WhatsApp. So, but I do know that we have to learn to deal with it, and why is social media largely in the hands of fascists and right-wing, and why progressive people have not been able to use it. The one reason is, and I don't know the others, is my niece told me, why don't you use Instagram, then people will know all about. I said, because every argument, I can't argue on the Instagram. I can't have a conversation on this, Twitter. So there is a need for conversation and analysis, which you can't do on social media. So how we have Scroll, we have Wire, and they're all under attack. So these are challenges I don't have answers, but I know that these are the challenges. As for eating with people who are out, I'm not sure. I think we should recognize that this is part of our caste system. And I think that basis of many of the things is not question of interdining and having little iftar parties, but really reform of Hinduism in a very large scale. And we've not had reform movements in Hinduism for a long, long time. And that's why there's a lot of problem.
Ma'am, it's wonderful. The life, did you choose this life? What have you gone through? Sure. Ma'am, the question is up here. Yeah. Ma'am,
So, can I ask a question, though? Yeah. What's your question, please?
Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, the life that you, it's such an agonizing state of what you are talking about. The empathy that you have been tolerant to listen to others. Did you choose this life of being a lawyer, or what you have gone through? Or personally, you would want a different state of life, that you would never go through this, and ultimately you're honored to receive at such an old age after seeing so much. Thank you, Naresh. Thank you, ma'am. It's wonderful. It's a pleasure to listen to you. But would this the life that you are imparting to others, being tolerant and listening to others, the voices of others, to release the prisoners from their state and make them a happy individuals? Is this the country which we are looking out for?
Thanks. So let Nandita. Nandita, would you do things another way?
I don't think I chose this. This gets chosen for you. Because I didn't choose to attack the parliament. Someone attacked the parliament. Someone gets framed, and then you choose whether you defend the person you think is innocent or not. So for people in our line of work, it is chosen for us. It's not necessarily something we choose. We can only choose the causes we take up, because there are so many, which prisoners issues we take up, how we take them up. But basic life is chosen. Who wants to, go to jails and courts and lockups? Nobody. I don't think it's very healthy to... In fact, I remember asking someone, haven't you been to jail? And she said, I hope you realize that most people don't go to jail. So...
There's a question there.
Actually, I just wanted to ask you that you've written a lot about Kashmir, and a lot of changes have taken place. And could you kindly just elaborate a little about, what you feel about the various changes and, your experiences? Thank you.
But that's a large question, but I've written 2 books, and basically the issue is, what are the grievances of the Kashmiri people? And then again, there's Ladakh, there's Kashmir, there's Jammu. What is it that they have been asking? And if you ask anyone, if you see my book, it's very critical of Hurriyat, of Jamaat-e-Islami, it's critical of Panun Kashmir, of RSS, and touch wood, there have been no demonstrations. So I think the people of Kashmir just want to be listened to and to be understood. That they are not just, there are genuine grievances, that they feel that they have been, their promises have been broken. And I think that space is there for them. They responded to this book. It's gone into 3rd print and mostly sold in Kashmir. So it only shows that they want to hear, they want you to listen to their voices, they want you to understand. And that is a very important part of Kashmiri, that they don't feel they have justice. Whether you agree with them or disagree is not what they really want. They don't necessarily want you to agree or disagree, but they feel they don't have justice. And that is what they really want.
There's a question there. Jyoti.
Actually, there are just 2 questions. You said that your petitions are like stories, not what's supposedly professional petition. So I wanted to know how the judges reacted to your petitions. And second thing is that you chose to be a lawyer and you got justice, or you failed to get justice for many. But now the courts have changed. So what is the challenge that you feel? Do you have hope that you can continue fighting and be successful in whatever you fight?
No, I don't know whether I was trying to be successful. What was the first question? No, I understand. Okay, stories, yeah. Okay, that's a nice question. I'll just tell you one small story which I've written here, is that I was asking for It was behalf of some Nagas whose land has been taken away, wet paddy field. So sitting in the village, I said, what does it mean? So that wet paddy field, what had been taken, there are frogs there, there are insects. When the wet paddy field became dry, they lost their source of protein. Then I converted that protein into calories, and I wrote this chart of all the things which were missing from the wet paddy field. So we had a chart of, I don't know how many kgs of insect and frogs and whatever, all this. So this was taken into account by the judges in Imphal. There were 2 Naga judges, and they didn't think twice about it. And they gave the judgment and the compensation of 1 crore on the basis of this chart. So when it came to Supreme Court, they looked at this chart with frogs and insects, and then they said, well, this is a very unusual way, but they couldn't undo it. So I think that sometimes the story, they understand, they don't know how to deal with it, but I have never been pulled up for writing any of these stories, and the stories are sometimes written not in the main body of the petition, but as affidavits, so that they know that who are these people appearing before you, and who are these people who are asking for justice. So judges have never pointed that part out to me. In fact, I'm sorry, but fellow lawyers have rather complained, rather than the judges. So that's one. As for lawyer, I did give up practice for many reasons. Some are personal because of my not being able to run up and down steps. And I wanted to write, but that's, I don't think that one can give up. I mean, even in the middle, I think these are the forum where else you have to write, or you have to go to court, or you have to speak. What else can we do? But the need is to have a kind of solidarity. And that when we are alone writing or alone fighting, that's when people get broken. So if we have, we need to remember that those people who are fighting the case and those in jail and those of us outside doing campaign, that sense, because the movement is no longer there. We were part of human rights movement or women's movement. All these movements also have gone for various reasons. So that solidarity is not there. People are feeling disillusioned, feeling very weak politically to be able to fight. So I feel that solidarity, and maybe that's why people have said they like my books, because it reminds them of that time of that solidarity. But I think some of us in those, we still remember, I still think that we're still, I don't think we have a choice in all this. It's there, so we do it, whether courts are bad or good. But I think that our job as writers or as people is to keep analyzing this, keep documenting this. And just like people who lived through fascism documented what happened in fascism, and we read about it, people will read how we struggled or did not.
I think we're almost out of time. Could you read us a passage from your book, please?
Okay. Okay. I find it very embarrassing reading. Okay. Amma Papa made sure we learned to appreciate the food and lifestyle of different cultures while having pride in our own culture and cuisines. This may all sound naive, but those were different times. It was around that time in November 1966 that the General Conference of the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, UNESCO, passed the Declaration of Principles of International Cultural Cooperation. Article 1 reads, "Each culture has a dignity and value which must be respected and preserved." So when I think of Vienna Schnitzel, I cannot help speculating whether we in India could ever decide on a national dish. With all that noise about one language, one nation, one culture, what about a national dish? There is speculation in the media that the humble khichdi may be declared as a national dish of India. As the first chef, celebrity chef Sanjeev Kapoor and celebrity yoga instructor and businessman Baba Ramdev cooked 18 kgs of the dish. The tadka or seasoning alone consumed 25 kgs of ghee, 1 kg of turmeric powder, 500 grams of cumin seeds. The feed had been entered into the Guinness Book of Records and the khichdi was distributed among the poor. If we must have a national dish, although I don't understand the need for one, khichdi would be a good choice. After all, nearly every state has its own version. From the Bisibili Huli Anna of Karnataka to the Pongal of Tamil Nadu to Keeme ki khichdi of Hyderabad to the simple moong dal khichdi which many of us have when we have a stomach upset. Foreign travelers to India over the centuries noticed the dish, and the Mughals, Aurangzeb, Akbar, Jahangir, all loved their khichdi. Michelin-starred chefs have invented their own versions, such as black olive khichdi, lobster khichdi, and some versions have 50 different ingredients. The declaration of khichdi as a national dish should be welcomed. But will the government try and arrive at one national recipe? That is when the controversies will start.
Thank you, Nandita. This is a perfectly delicious note on which to end our conversation. Thank you, everybody. You've been a great audience, and congratulations again.